Great rising, fellow Earthlings. As you know, we are all in this together. However, listening to some of the things they say, you could be forgiven for thinking that they live on another planet. One of the British variants, commonly known as Boris Johnson, is very likely a Uranusist. In a recent broadcast, he corrected the public's misguided belief that the vaccine is the cure. We were told it is the roadmap to freedom. To life, to death, to ever being born in the first place, one could argue. But no, the reason for decreasing cases cannot be credited to the jab, but in fact to the lockdown. The lockdown failed the first time, so dissatisfied with that result, they told us to try harder, and we had a second one, which has now worked, despite non-mask wearers and lockdown skeptics not dying. So we are now coming out of lockdown, even though the jab doesn't reduce cases, and they predict another wave in the autumn, for which we will go back into lockdown because it works.
Numbers in hospitalizations and in deaths and in infections has not been achieved by the vaccination program. People don't, I think, appreciate that it's the lockdown that has been overwhelmingly important in delivering this improvement in the pandemic and in the figures that we're seeing. And so, yes, of course, the vaccination program has helped, but the bulk of the work in reducing the disease has been done by the lockdown.
Another one of the British variants, Matt Hancock, is perhaps a Plutonian. Although the science now tells us that Pluto is no longer a planet as I was taught in school. It was called a moon at some point, I believe, but now appears to be a dwarf planet. Science changes quite a lot sometimes, even though it's settled and never wrong, and it's almost illegal to question it nowadays. This might explain the moon-like facial expressions of Mr. Hancock when he is asked inconvenient questions for which he has no answer. He truly does have a great ability to string together a lot of awful words. Sorry, I meant to say he truly does have a great ability to string together an awful lot of words, whilst totally failing to answer a simple question, to which yes or no would suffice. We don't need verbal diarrhea. Although maybe that does explain his moon-like facial expressions. On the 13th of April 2021, The Telegraph published an article claiming that a quarter of the previously announced and recorded COVID deaths were not in fact from COVID. As of April 14th, the death toll for the UK is 127,161 as per Worldometer. This means that the COVID death figures are overinflated by approximately 31,790. Were they practicing the same mathematical gymnastics as Professor Ferguson, perhaps? This figure is, of course, for 2020 and 2021, and likely for 2022 as well. Am I the only one that finds it curious that they don't count cancer deaths, or heart attacks, or strokes, or influenza, or gonorrhea with the same rolling totals and morbid enthusiasm? Incidentally, influenza would appear to be on an extended maternity leave after giving birth to COVID in China. She must be being held in quarantine and is unable to fly back due to the travel bans, which explains the almost non-existent cases of flu. One could be forgiven for thinking you are living in an inverted world, perhaps even as if you have stepped through some interdimensional portal and are in a parallel dystopian universe. That could actually be quite entertaining, and maybe even preferable. Or maybe you were just dreaming, or more likely having a nightmare. Sadly, it is none of the aforementioned, and it is time to break the spell and see through the Matrix. Thank you for listening. It doesn't matter if you woke up 20 years ago or 2 minutes ago. We all need to stand together and say no to their planned re-engineering of life on planet Earth.